Well, I should just sit down after that great introduction from my fellow West Virginian, Evan Jenkins, who's doing a great job here at the Chamber, but also did a wonderful job as a representative here in Washington for what was then the 3rd Congressional District, but also in our state Senate. And Evan and I actually started out in the late 90s in the House of Delegates in West Virginia. So I'm very, very pleased to be here in front of you. And I am so excited about what the U.S. Chamber is doing to pull together an incredible coalition, an incredible both sides of the aisle, all specters of thought to really permit America to build. This is essential, and I think it's not just a must-do, it's something that we have to do, but I think it's something that we really can do. And as you know, in these highly political, polarized times, it's nice to find the things that you can do together. So as we look at how I think this whole thing can roll out, as Evan said, I'm the ranking member on the Environment and Public Works Committee. The chairman, I believe, will be here later today, Tom Carper. We have a history of working together over the last 2 years. And I think it was really the pinnacle for us was when the infrastructure bill was signed on the south lawn of the White House. Remembering back when the Chamber was very active in that particular bill, the real crux of that bill and remained the crux of that bill were two really important pieces of legislation: the highway bill and the drinking water and wastewater bill. We moved both of those bills through our committee, through regular order, with amendments, with discussion, with back and forth negotiation, not easy negotiations, between the Republicans and Democrats side. We passed both of those bills out of our committee unanimously. Remember, our committee then was Bernie Sanders and Jim Inhofe. I mean, pulling them together from both sides to get them to vote, to weigh in, realizing that America likes to build. America likes bridges and roads and safe highways and safe airports. We want to cap our wells. We want to expand our broadband. All of these things that were in the bigger package, but began with really the core package that we were able to pull together in our Environment and Public Works Committee. So it's not just a tribute, I don't think, to the chairman and I as being able to work together and being able to get things done, but the staff work, the outside work that came together for those really, I think, got the ball rolling. I was able to start that with the president, and then we saw it November begin to signed by the president. And as we know, now we have these great expectations. We've got a lot of money. We got a lot of need. Well, we can't build. I mean, some of the timelines that we see for highway projects, for energy projects, for water projects are, I thought it was interesting that Suzanne said in her video that sometimes it takes longer to permit than actually to build. That's really discouraging, really discouraging. And I know that's why everybody's here today. So last year, as we turned to talking about permitting, I introduced a bill called the START Act. It had a lot of the elements that I think that would be a very successful and meaningful reforms to permitting. Pretty much knew, of course, as you start a negotiation, that everything was not going to be in there that I would desire and that I would write it. But we couldn't get it over the finish line for a lot of different reasons. And we tried behind the scenes kind of negotiation that went through until December, but we really just kind of crumbled then under the weight of what was happening with the election, what had happened with honestly, the Inflation Reduction Act and other things. It just wasn't going to happen. So the encouraging thing to me is it's kind of an all hands on deck proposition right now. You have the president talking about permitting. You have your wonderful coalition that you've pulled together, a lot of other outside groups, labor groups. You have Republicans and Democrats, House and Senate. Everybody's talking about the possibilities of permitting reform and what that will mean. So my proposition and my feeling is the way to really get this over the finish line, and that's why we're all here. We want a product. We want meaningful reform, but we want to be able to have something that's going to have meaningful results, is to work this through our committees so that by the time we get it ready And the House has already done a lot of the work on their side with H.R. 1. That gives us a good basis to start with. So on April 26th, we're going to have a hearing in Environment and Public Works, something that I've been asking Chairman Carper for us to put together. And I'm hopeful that the Energy and Natural Resources Committee will do the same, because those two committees really share the bulk of the jurisdiction of what we're talking about here. And hopefully we can get to that kind of meaningful consensus within our committees. And you know, I'm an optimist. I'm always going to say we're going to be able to get there. I think we can get there. That I think that we can put it over the finish line. So recently joined Senator Barrasso with an op-ed to talk about what permitting reform would mean to us as Republicans, to sort of put our markers down, and we will be putting bills out. But it has 4 main tenets, and it really sort of mirrors a lot of what I saw in your ideas. One is that we'll be technology and fuel neutral to benefit energy projects of all kinds, but I think even broader than that, all kinds of projects, not just energy projects, infrastructure projects, road projects, other kinds of projects water projects that require, even broadband projects that require the permitting process. Enforceable deadlines. This is going to be a tough one. We really believe, I think, that the agencies just keep passing the buck, elongating, delay for a couple reasons. Number one, they don't like the projects. They hope if they delay long enough, they'll just fold, and all of a sudden you're nowhere. It becomes too expensive, too difficult to defend, and people walk away from the projects. We've seen that in our state. They also, there's no meat behind an enforceable deadline. If they go past a deadline, what happens? Basically nothing. Nothing happens in terms of the agency. All it does is push more and more of the burden onto whoever's the developer is, the builder is, the community is, the state is, whoever's participating here. Becomes more and more. So we're going to look for enforceable deadlines with specific time limits. I think it's important to emphasize, for all of us to emphasize, we're not looking to shave any environmental review. We're not looking to bowl over any kind of clean water or clean air actions that would damage our environment. That's not in your best interest, that's not in our best interest, and that's not the goal here. The goal is to make enforceable timelines and deadlines. We will be putting into place another thing that elongates these projects, which are the judicial reviews. They go on and on and on. And there's no real deadline as to how much you can, well, there are deadlines, but they're way too long. They last too long. And for the opponents of projects, or we call them sometimes in West Virginia cavemen, citizens against virtually everything. In order for them they can find that way to keep suing on different parts of the permit to try to prevent taking it up to through the court system. So we think we're hoping, our idea is to require groups challenging environmental reviews to do so within 60 days after the project approval, so that we can prevent some of this endless litigation. And I think there's going to be some bipartisan buy-in here on the judicial review, because they see everybody sees how that elongates our processes. We're going to first ask for some substantive changes to the NEPA review, also to the Clean Water Act. We just did have the Congressional Review Act. We had 5 Democrats joined all the Republicans in the Senate on my efforts to take down the new definition of the waters of the U.S. We've got a Supreme Court is going to come down in June. For the life of me, I don't know why they went ahead in March and April to put forward a rule that is going to have to be changed again in June. The back and forth, the changing of something so critical delays projects and makes it more expensive and very difficult. So we're going to try to work some of those. And you know, the Waters of the U.S. law is something that if we could codify this permanently, and maybe that may be too far of a stretch, but we're going to try. It would actually make it, I think, a lot more certain and a lot more easier to deal with in the process, and it wouldn't be able to be slow walked the way we see that it is. So it's important to know, why are we doing this? I mean, you all can tell me project after project that's gotten delayed or can't get off the ground. I can tell you in West Virginia, we have what the Mountain Valley Pipeline that has been strung out for years, billions of dollars, keeps going up to the Fourth Circuit and pushed back down to the to be further reviewed. They're in another ping pong situation right now. You know that both permitting bills that came forward at the end of the year, we said, look, this pipeline's 95% done. It's gonna move a whole lot of product to areas that need it. It's going to be one of the largest largest essential pipelines of natural gas into our country. Both Manchin and I had this in our two separate bills, but it still was unable to get across the finish line. So that's one project that I can name in our state. It goes through Virginia and down into North Carolina. We have manufacturing projects. We have a new Nucor plant that's going to be siting in West Virginia. According to an article I read yesterday, they are in this permitting elongation, making their project more expensive, and you're subject to seasonal things as well along the Ohio River, which makes it more difficult, so you have more time. And then we have our Quarter H, if you've ever driven from DC across the beautiful mountains, across into our ski area or some of our most remote areas. Quarter H has been on the books for 30 years. One of the radio hosts who's my age in West Virginia, his name's Hoppy Kercheval. He's sort of the dean of the West Virginia media, and he said to me, Shelley, are you and I going to actually see Quarter H be complete? And I said, of course, but we're living to 100. We have to remember that. So, it was a joke, but I'm afraid it might be kind of true. So, those are three areas that we see in West Virginia very specifically, where we see permitting has absolutely stymied development. And what does it do? It stops development in certain regions of our state. It stops the creation of jobs. It stops the domestic manufacturing of goods. There's all kinds of talks on Capitol Hill about how we want to bring manufacturing back, how we need critical minerals. We're all going to be driving EVs. We need all these critical minerals. How are you going to cite a mine for that? I mean, how are you going to do that under the timelines that are specifically in some of these pieces of legislation? The short answer is you can't. You won't be able to. And so that's very, very discouraging. So I think what we see is we see a good convergence of where the Democrats, they want more transmission. They, for their renewable projects, I mean, that's not all that they want, but that's a driving force for the other side. And that's very important, and I think it is essential. And we see transmission issues all across the country, and we're going to see more and more of that as we move towards a more electrified economy. But we also have these essential. We're going to have a big play in hydrogen. How are you going to move it? How are you going to move it? How are you going to get it where it needs to go and then fully develop it? Well, I don't think you're going to put it on a truck. I think you're going to need to put it in a pipeline, and that again are essential. Views of where permitting and where we can forge a compromise with your help through all the different coalitions that you've put together to be able to say to the Democrats on our committee and the Republicans in our committee, look, we may not want to approach, we may be approaching this from a different angle on where our real needs are. Getting successful legislation is about not just getting, but giving up some things that you really don't want. And so in order to get there, we're going to have that mindset across the committees. And I think in the committee, with the committee leadership, with the staffs working together, with all of you, and talking with the relative agencies of what's really going to work, I think that's the way to do it. I don't believe we're in a state of time right now in this new Congress where we can put a gang together and then just put it up and let it roll. I just don't think that strategy is going to work. And so that's why I'm leaning heavily on the four leaders of our Energy and Natural Resource and also our Environment and Public Works Committee on the Senate side to be in constant conversation with the House. I've had numerous conversations with our House leaders. I know that they're having conversations with both Republican and Democrat leaders over in the Senate, and with their own, they're working together as much as they can across the aisle over there to try to get something successful. The last thing I'll address, because I'll probably get a question on this, because it's been very newsy and in the news here over the last 48 hours. We just got back in town yesterday. So is the proposition that permitting reform can go onto the debt limit bill. We know we have a debt limit must pass. We don't want to default. You all are business leaders and all across the country. Nobody wants to default on our debt. I certainly don't want to. I've been through this debt limit vote many times. I've been in for quite a while. And so Speaker McCarthy yesterday mentioned quite strongly that he thought one of his negotiating pieces would be to put meaningful permitting reform onto the debt limit. I think it's a good start. Putting all of H.R. 1 on there is probably a bite of the apple just a little bit too big. But if we can narrow down to meaningful permitting reform and permit, as you say, permit America to build, that might be enough to satisfy some folks who are saying, I don't think exclusively that would be the only thing that would push the debt limit bill over. But I do think it's possible to have permitting reform on there. But I think what my goal is, and how I think it's even more possible, is to get the policy right. I think the catchword in what I heard on your video and what I'm hearing is meaningful. Now, we know that doesn't mean everything Shelley Moore Capito wants, or anybody out, anybody who's thinking like I am and my START Act. But we also know that it doesn't have some of the things that some other folks believe. So work this through committee, get meaningful, get the policy right, and then we'll find the vehicle. So if it's the debt limit, great. But let's get the policy right. So where we're not going back, nothing burns me more than to have something work through, get passed, and you're raising questions. This has happened. You raise questions in the beginning as a policymaker. Listen, I'm not sure this is going to work right, and the response from the stakeholders is, well, we'll work it out later. That's a bad strategy. The work out later strategy, sometimes it works. A lot of times it never works because you never quite get to it. And it's held out as a bargaining chip that never gets used. We got to get it right the first time, and I think that's what you're interested in. I think that's where we see the passion in the room. That's where I am and want to be with you, and I think that's where the general consensus of the Republicans and Democrats that I've talked to in the Senate, and that's been numerous folks, I think that's where we all are. So let's work towards the end of this being meaningful reform that makes a difference, that lets us build and lets us move forward. And I look forward to being your partner. I think I have been already. The hard work that we're doing in our committee, our doors are always open. Adam Tomlinson's here with me. He's my staff director on committee. My personal office is ready to go. We want to work with you, with the White House, with the House, the Senate, the Republicans, and the Democrats to make sure we have a successful result. And here's my final thought. People like me, most people like me, I'll say that. When I describe myself as me, I would say people like me who came to Washington or went to Charleston, West Virginia to serve in the legislature, I really want to have a result. I want to have something I can talk about that we actually did and that's making a difference in people's lives. And I think in these next 2 years, it's going to be hard to find those things for folks like me to hang our hat on, to say, we did this and it made a meaningful difference, and that's why you're seeing this in your lives. Because of the structure of the Republican House, the Senate is always an issue with a 51-49 split, and that's been difficult with absences and other things. The president now, pursuing, a presidential campaign of 2024, however that shakes out. So you've got all these kind of factors that are really hard to fight over and that are going to prevent, I think, some things from actually getting done. This is the thing we can do. This is what we can do that makes a measurable difference in somebody's life back in Davis, West Virginia, which is right over there by the end of Quarter H. So thank you for listening. I'm happy to answer questions, and let's get this done together. I look forward to your help. I look forward to helping you, and I look forward to making this country really live up to the expectations of the vision of the infrastructure bill that was that you all played a great part in, and that I very happily voted for and pushed at the highest levels. Thank you. Questions?
Want to go to Brian Kelly from Sempra. You talked a little bit about the macro items that you're thinking about. But if you had to pick one that is the most impactful in permit reform, what would that be? Because as you talked about the other side, I think you're talking about transmission. If you think about ranking and kind of the one for one as you go into this process, where does it start? Because we obviously can't have everything, but what is the biggest thing that you think could do more for the companies in the room?
I mean, I would, thank you, Brian, and I would say you all can tell me that better, but I'll tell you what I think. And I'm going to pull two of my principles together at the same time, because I think they're probably equally as important. The judicial review piece and the timelines. In other words, to make sure that every agency is adhering to a timeline, figure out a way to make sure that that's not easy to do, because our leverage on enforcement from our perspective to enforce an agency to abide by a deadline sounds like that would be easy, but if they go by the deadline, there's no penalty. So we've got to figure that out. Those, to me, are the two most important in terms of shortening the timeline, getting an effective result. So I would say timelines are shot clock, and then the judicial review process to make it sure that it has, again, a deadline, an end point, and so I think that's the most important thing for us, I think. Unless somebody wants to tell me otherwise. Anybody else? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hi there, Jeff Kupfer from Conserve America. Thanks again for all your leadership, both in the past and continued. Question about how important you think the administration's engagement is in moving things forward, and how engaged have they been? And also, as you think about the timeline for putting a package together and then getting it on a vehicle, are there some kind of deadlines or anything that we should all look to and push towards in terms of helping to get something done?
I would say we don't really have it on the deadline issue. We don't have a deadline. I think we are going to have a stakeholders hearing on the 26th. We're going to hopefully have another one in May. I think Energy is looking to have one, Energy and Natural Resources to have one at the beginning of May. We already have the House package, so that's extremely useful. So they moved very quickly and effectively, and I think that is a good play. They did get some Democrat support there, which I think is an indication of an appetite there, and I think there is much more over on that side. Personally, I think the deadline's got to be before the end of the year. I'd like to see it, in the June region. It's just going to depend on how fast we can negotiate and what kind of hard positions people are going to take. I think we have a bit of an idea on that, but it's a new year and it's a new Congress, so we'll see. In terms of the administration, the president has talked about it publicly and has emphasized it. He mentioned it, I believe, in his State of the Union address. No specifics from them, but to me that signals a willingness to talk, and at least to be a positive in terms of working with certainly the Democrats in either the House or the Senate. And I think that's a positive rather than, a hard no, or we're not gonna, or we have to have these certain things in there before we would move forward. And so I think what they see is if they want to turn the corner into next year and start talking about some of the projects from bills that they feel deeply about, if you can't get any of them permitted or any dirt turned or any successful results, it looks like a mission without really any accomplishments. So I do believe it will be before the end of the year. I would like to see it before the end of, before we move into the August recess. And because September is going to end up being in appropriations. I'm on appropriations as well. If you look at where that's going to be, we're probably going to be dealing with that. Hopefully we'll be dealing with it way before that, but chances are a lot of the pressure is going to build in September, and that will make it more difficult for unless that's the vehicle, which that could be as well. Here's one cautionary tale that I just struck in my mind. When we passed the highway bill, we passed something called one federal decision, which means all the agencies roll into a principal agency that makes that kind of honchos the whole project. And we've had one, President Trump put one federal decision, and we codified it in the highway bill. It's in the infrastructure package for highway projects. Here's where the administration really needs to help. They need to actually roll the process out in a regulatory way and make sure it works. You all know better than I that you can have the law written one way and then the regulatory environment comes in and reworks it. We've already seen that in the highway space to a certain degree. So we need this one federal decision for all projects so that we don't have tag teaming with each agencies. I've been in meetings with different federal agencies and say, oh, no, I sent you that. No, I sent you that. No, you didn't get that. No, I'm first. No, you're... That just is a total delay. I mean, you can raise your hand if you've had this experience. It's Fish and Wildlife, it's the Corps, it's EPA, it's the state DEP, and it's just a circle. So I think this one federal decision is critical. It's going to be critical how it's written. We did get bipartisan buy-in for the highway bill, so I'm hoping that we could get the same thing for for the other agencies as we move through other kinds of projects. And the administration's the one that can really help us drive that. Yeah.
Hi, Senator. Chris Knight with Argus Media. Do you still want to see Mountain Valley Pipeline approval in the permitting bill, and is that a hard negotiating demand from you?
I do. I do, and I think, I had 48 other Republicans on my bill, the START Act, at the end of last year that had the Mountain Valley Pipeline in it. Senator Manchin and I know he's going to be coming up later, had some discussions, and he said, Shelley, can you get me 15 people for my permitting bill? And I said, Joe, you only got to get me 11 Democrats. Come on, why don't you go with me? So both of those had MVP in it. It's going to be a negotiating angle. Part of what we had in there, we had a little bit different approaches to it. There was an approach of it's deemed permitted, move the venue to the DC District Court out of the Fourth Circuit. So we're working with the MVP people. We want this. We need this. I want it in there. It remains to be seen what form it might take. And so I'll leave that as something I'm passionate about, but realizing that it has some headwinds that could make it a little bit difficult. What I learned in the process is a lot of other states have other projects they'd like to have, you know how that goes. Anything else? All right, well, I'll go back to committee. We're going to be having a hearing on electric vehicles, of all things. So that very timely. It was planned before, but after the president's announcement, I'm sure it will be very interesting. So thank you all very much. Keep at it. I have these little, I was thinking about this morning, these little bracelets on that my daughter gave me. It has all our grandchildren on here, and the person that makes these has a little saying, and she says, you know how in your life you say, well, I have to do this, or I have to do that. And it takes on a negative connotation on your life. So we have to do permitting. It's something that we have to do. She says we need to change it to, I get to do this. I get it. So let's get to do permitting reform and keep that upbeat, positive, there's something in this for everybody, and it can be done attitude, and I think we can get it done. Thank you.